Good morning. Hope you didn't spend too much time scouring the internet for yesterday's COVID devotional, but I was feeling a little under the weather, so I didn't get to it yesterday, so I apologize for that. But we're back on it today, finishing out Nehemiah. We're going to look at Nehemiah 13, verses 1 to 5 today. It says, "At that time, the book of Moses was read publicly to the people. The command was found written in it that no Ammonite or Moabite should ever enter the assembly of God, because they did not meet the Israelites with food and water. Instead, they hired Balaam against them to curse them. But our God turned that curse into a blessing." So let's stop right there. This is referencing a story that happened earlier in Numbers. So if you're really interested in the story of Balaam and what they're talking about here, that's Numbers 22 to 24. But the thing that I like about this is that what man intended for evil, God intended for good. And John Piper puts it perfectly when he says that it's so comforting to know that even in our rebellion, we're unwittingly serving God's ultimate plan. That we cannot frustrate the purposes and the will of God. We cannot frustrate his plans. And so when it says our enemies turned a curse, God turned a curse from our enemies into a blessing, think of how Jesus chose Judas to be a disciple. And he knew the entire time that Judas would betray him, and yet he broke bread with him, and he was one of the closest 12 people, and he taught him daily, knowing that this was going to occur. So we can't say that Judas's betrayal was frustrating the plans of God, but no, from the beginning of time, God knew that Judas would betray Jesus, and it was by that method that all of humanity would have a path to salvation. It was by that betrayal, by Judas' sin, and yet doesn't frustrate God's plans. So know that God turns curses into blessings. That's powerful to take away from. Then it says, when they heard the law, they separated all those of mixed descent from Israel. Now before this, the priest Elishib had been put in charge of the storerooms of the house of God. He was a relative of Tobiah and had prepared a large room for him where they had previously stored the grain offerings, the frankincense, the articles, the tents of grain, new wine, the fresh oil prescribed for the Levites, singers, and gatekeepers, along with the contributions for the priests. So, when I discovered this, he said, I discovered the evil of Elisha done on behalf of Tobiah by providing him a room in the courts of God's house. I was greatly displeased and threw all of Tobiah's household possessions out of the room. I ordered that the rooms be purified, and I had the articles of the house of God restored there, along with the grain offerings and frankincense. I promise I don't have the virus. I've got something stuck in my throat, so I keep coughing. I really hope you couldn't hear that sip. It was kind of gross. So the thing that pops up here is it's going to be a running theme in chapter 13, where the rebuilding of the wall is going to turn out to be child's play compared to the rebuilding and the consistent faithfulness of the spiritual journey of Israel. And that's the thing that we all struggle with, is we struggle with being consistently faithful. It's easy to have that conversion experience, or even that mountaintop experience where you come back to God and you're like, I'm all in, I'm doing it again. And the point is not to have these mountaintops and valleys, but to have this mountaintop and then be consistently faithful to the Lord. So in this first thing, we're going to see four things that they forgot. They forgot the vows that they had made. Apparently some time had passed between chapters 1 to 12 and chapter 13, And we see in the next section that Nehemiah had gone back to the king Artaxerxes and returned, and that's when he's writing this. So they had forgotten the vow that they had just taken a few years ago, the vow of separation. Now, again, this has nothing to do with interracial marriage, but this is about God's people being separate and set apart and holy unto him. So the takeaway for us today is, have we in our day-to-day, we've turned Christianity into a routine. In our routine Christianity, have we forgotten our vow of separation? Are we trying to be holy? Are we approaching things and saying, well, can I do it, or is it a sin? Or are we approaching things and saying, should I do it? Is it helpful? Does it make me holy? That's a huge difference. Can I do it? Is it sinful? Or should I do it? Is it holy? Is it helpful? So don't forget your vow of separation. Have a great week, and may the Lord be with you today.